One of the things I love about this was it just feels like it was really insight driven. So Friends of the Earth knew that people weren't really connecting with nature as much as they should do. So, we're living in cities, we're not thinking so much about where our food comes from, we're not gardening, we're not, getting stuck in there and sort of connecting to the earth in the way that I guess Friends of the Earth's vision of the world, people would hope it would be. They also knew that Friends of the Earth wasn't really differentiated from Greenpeace very much. They had sort of a brand problem as well as kind of a consumer sort of engagement with their cause problem. Thirdly, they knew there was a really genuine problem for bees. They're just, lots of bees were dying and there's pesticides, it's all terrible. But the fourth thing they knew was that they needed language that people could understand. And because they wanted to do something that was kind of integrating the kind of policy asks and the comms asks and the fundraising asks, they needed to make sure their language actually reached out to a lot of people. So they didn't want to talk in kind of dry policy terms. And what I love about this is you've got insight on so many different levels. You've got insight about the brand and the organisation, you've got insight about the audience, you've got insight about, just how tone of voice works and the policy insight. What was the Bee Cause? Well, it was really, I think, a genuinely integrated campaign that covered not just sort of communications and fundraising, it actually also covered policy and activism. And this is why I'm so excited about this, because I think it shows a real way forward for communications professionals within organisations. So they had targets on all kinds of things. They had targets on media coverage, national, regional and kind of lifestyle press. They had targets on petitions and campaign actions. They had targets on their local groups, because they have 200 or so local groups. They had targets around MPs signing up to statements and early day motions and all that kind of thing. They had targets on sort of other allies they could get on board, so like people like the Co-op supermarket they ended up working with, sort of, a really wide range of stakeholders. And they also had a target on the income raise. And I just think you really rarely see a campaign that covers all of this ground. You really rarely see an organisation coming together and all those departments going, you know what, we're going to do this together. We're going to do the same thing together all year. We're not all going to come up with our own things. And that's what's great about it. So what did they actually do? Well, they did some things you might expect, I guess, if you're doing any kind of policy sort of campaign. So they did some policy research, they did press release, they did petition, all those P's that we love if we're doing policy work. So you can see the petition there. I guess, it was a bit innovative because generally you don't have people in a bee suit delivering a petition. But more importantly, I think, they really thought very widely about who they could engage in this. So they went to places like the Chelsea Flower Show, which again is, I think if you're thinking Friends of the Earth activism, if Friends of the Earth is like Greenpeace would never go to the Chelsea Flower Show, right? So this is kind of just showing they sort of grew their brand through doing this. They went to Wimbledon because they realised that the price of strawberries was up by 84% due to the bee problem. They made it very, very relevant to the Wimbledon audience. They did wildflower planting. So again, Greenpeace, this isn't Greenpeace, is it? Like Greenpeace would go and, demonstrate or whatever outside or climb a tree and put up a banner. They got people actually, planting the seeds. They did sort of some above the line work as well. And they also, it wasn't just the big festivals, they had things at garden centres. I guess Harrow Garden Centre is not as well known as the Chelsea Flower Show or Wimbledon, but they took the campaign there too. And they had people sort of in their own allotments, kind of, sort of building their own bee worlds, basically. And then finally, they had some direct response ads. And this is where I think the campaign goes from good to great. Because I think here you've got that rare and wonderful thing, which is a truly integrated proposition across fundraising, policy, communications, brand, everything. Because whereas to policymakers and probably to the media, they were saying, you need the bees. So to be able to eat, you need bees. This way, they were telling it exactly the other way around, but it's still consistent and saying the bees need you. And they found a really concrete thing that people could do on this. And it was a different thing. It wasn't a retweet this, it wasn't a share it on Facebook, it wasn't a sign the petition, it was sow some seeds. And it was really successful. What do I think was really, really great about it? Well, firstly, I guess was in terms of huge reach through media coverage, but also through those events and through the corporate engagement. So people like the Co-op, signed up to help with it. Local councils sometimes said they'd change their planting, so they kind of put in different plants that bees liked. They also got about 100,000 actions from people, which is pretty, decent size in these days when we're all looking at change.org and going, oh no, how do we get enough zeros on our, campaign actions? This is a proper one. They also raised lots of income, and they got politicians signing up to create a bee action plan. So they got so that's on every level. They've got sort of the brand reach, they've got the activism, they've got the fundraising, they've got the policy. It achieved all of those things. Which again I think is really rare, because often you get one of these things dominating and the other one's not quite stacking up. So it was a really, really genuinely kind of integrated message, and it was really, really tangible. And I think that is probably a challenge to us, because I think sometimes we can end up putting our profession before our organisation's mission. And I think it's really, really important that we use our communication skills to help the organisation. So if the organisation's problem or its aim is around fundraising, we should be using communication skills to help with that, rather than going, it's always about brand. We've got to do a brand campaign. I've seen that happen too often in organisations, that you just assume that the thing you need to fix is the thing you know best. It's not necessarily that. It might be something else, but your skills can contribute to it. But it also, as I said, really repositioned Friends of the Earth. They look like a cuddly, family-friendly charity at the Wilderness Festival. You know, they just look completely different. They don't look radical. They look like, you know, an organisation that new audiences will engage with. Just this wonderful focus across all of the organisation on one thing, one activity. Friends of the Earth that year was about bees. You know, I'm sure there were lots of other things going on, lots of other departments doing other things, but it just made the message and the proposition so clear to everybody. But also, it really did something in the short term. So in the short term, they got all this reach actions, income and the policy commitments. But it also did something about the long-term connection between people and the environment. So in the short term, they got all those things that year, but they built a basis to make people reconnect with the earth. And I think sometimes we design our campaigns to think, oh God, this year the targets, you know, can we get, you know, brand awareness up 2%? Where can we go with income, whatever? We're not thinking about the thing that's holding us back, the real sort of consumer challenge that we've got there. And finally, I just love their honesty, because in talking to the people at Friends of the Earth I've talked to about this, they said it was really hard. You know, they didn't pretend that everybody came into a room the first day and went, yeah, we'll have a thing called the honeybee and it'll smile and that'll bring up, you know, income will go up. It was really, really hard to get all those departments talking to each other in the same language, thinking in the same kind of way. And so that kind of makes me feel like I'd love to have been part of that team, just to see all those people coming together.